So I am very excited. We have two wonderful people here today to share some of their expertise. We have Kathi Garza and Jill Gorman, and they're both going to share with us about the topic of working with kids with albinism. Kathi comes with a lot of experience from the Texas School for the Blind, as well as having albinism herself. And Jill Gorman is a mom of a student with albinism here in California. We really appreciate both of you joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm so glad to see all of you guys on my little Zoom gallery here. When I'm doing presentations at my work, we don't always get to see everybody, so it's really cool. And like Adrienne said, I'm Kathi Garza, and I am an adult with albinism. I live in Austin, Texas, and I work at Texas School for the Blind in the outreach department. I'm an infant early childhood consultant, but I've worked in a variety of positions at the school. I was a classroom teacher, and I worked in our short-term programs. I feel like I have like a 5-year plan. I spend 5 years in a position, and then I kind of find something new at the school to do. So it's a lot of fun. And then I also am a member of a volunteer for the National Organization for Albinism. Which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. And so today we're going to basically, I'm really hoping that you guys are feeling a bit chatty. We're going to ask some questions of you and share a little bit about ourselves throughout the process of this. And then towards the end, we wanted to share some information about the National Organization for Albinism and the programs and services that are available for professionals, parents, and for students. So Faye, I hope we don't bore you to death at the beginning, or any other students who are on here. I'm really super informal, and if you have, when I present in person, I always tell people, I'm not going to see you raising your hand. So if you want to ask a question, you either have to just verbally interject, or you have to dance and jump up and down. Most grown-ups don't want to do that, so they'll verbally catch me if they need something. So please ask questions in the chat if you have them. Jill and I are both very open to sharing. So Jill, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Jill Gorman, and my family, we live in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. Our son is a sophomore in high school. And I myself, I've also volunteered with NOAA, the National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation, for several years in different ways, both locally and at national conferences. Myself, I am a development associate. I work for an organization that supports people with programs and recreation who have disabilities and visual impairments. So sports programs and recreation. That's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to be putting a couple of questions in the chat periodically, and I'll also read them out loud, but just as a reference, they'll be in the chat. And what my hope is that you guys will either answer them in the chat while Jill and I are kind of sharing our answer or response to the question, or feel free to unmute yourself and share out as well, or ask a question. Again, I'm zoomed in, so if you use like the hand raise feature or something, I may not see you, but one of our lovely CSB people might be able to help with that too. But just feel free to ask. I really, when Jill and I were talking, we really want this to be for you guys. So I don't want to like linebacker the meeting and say this is what we have to talk about. I really want you guys to be able to get your questions or concerns answered. So the first question I'm going to put in the chat is, if you're working with students with albinism, or if you are a student with albinism and want to share, can you share a little bit about the areas of focus that you have for instruction? So what are some of the things that you guys are doing with your kids with albinism? What areas of focus are the goals, the IEP goals that you're writing, or the IEP goals that you have with them? That's what we're kind of trying to gauge. And maybe if you want to even include, how often do you see them? What's your service delivery look like for these kiddos? And I think Jill's going to share with us a little bit about her experience with her son.
Yeah,
Or-
so our son was diagnosed with albinism when he was about 8 months old. And from the get-go, as soon as we could, we got him involved with early intervention services. We worked with our school district, and they found us a program that was specifically for students with visual impairments, which was wonderful. Um, and we actually had services in our home for our son as well. It was a person who was both a TVI and an orientation and mobility specialist. So imagine, 9 months old, mom watching, orientation mobility specialist helping her son on stairs and maneuvering up and down stairs. It was scary, but I immediately understood the reasoning behind that. It was about safety and mobility, but safety first. So that's where we started. As he got older, starting with preschool and elementary school and middle school, he had both TVI and an orientation mobility specialist that he worked with. Um, and as he is now in high school, um, he chose a high school that's smaller. He liked that environment. So he's currently in a private school, so we work on a consulting basis with a TBI. Things still come up, one of which might be driving in the near future. And so it's nice to still have that connection with somebody who is a specialist in that area. But we also have the resource of NOAA. And within NOAA, there's people such as Kathi, who's here today, that as a parent, I can also reach out to and ask questions or participate in programs that NOAA has. And like Kathi shared, we'll talk more about those later. Um, some of the areas of instruction that I just pulled out a few thinking about this call today that I wanted to mention that I thought were important to us as parents. The first was orientation mobility. It covers so many things. As he was learning and working with the specialists, just for instance, like I mentioned, starting as a toddler, navigating the stairs in our home, to as soon as later in preschool and early kindergarten, learning how to not only map his school, but also map his neighborhood so that he could actually be mobile independently, going from home and school and back. Um, and from there, progressing on to having experiences where he would work with his orientation mobility specialist, starting at school and going to the neighborhood grocery store and actually going in and um, purchasing something. If he specifically was looking for something and couldn't find it, knowing how to seek out somebody that worked there and ask the question, can you help me locate this item that I'm looking for? And then paying for it, making sure that, with help at that age of being in kindergarten, the help of his orientation mobility specialist, making sure that he gets the receipt and the change back. To, just again, then as he got older, being able to get on public transportation and know how to maneuver, finding the right route and going to where he needed or wanted to go. So orientation mobility has been extremely important. And then working with his TVI all through his school years has been always such a partnership. And I think that alone right there, working with a TVI as a partner is just so important. And then having that communication with the whole IEP team has been key the whole time. And two things that really came to mind when thinking directly working with the TBI, assistive technology and starting to work on skills early as in preschool on independent living. So with assistive technology, Our son is a very high-tech kid. A lot of the kids are these days, but he really started working with technology maybe when he was 3 years old, whether it was a magnifier, iPad, computer. Um, and and what was really neat is that our TVI really worked with him to find out what worked best for him in the classroom. And as he was able to more better communicate what worked well for him, then as a team, we started getting him involved with actually setting up that technology before school would start for the next year, and then take an active role in explaining to his teacher how he would be using that technology in class, and actually showing his teacher with the support of his TVI how to use that technology as well. So again, the TVI really made it a partnership, not just with us as the parents, but with him as her student. And that was wonderful to watch. And the independent living piece, when Kathi and I were talking about this call earlier today, something popped into my head that I thought was just so amazing. And it happened when he was again in preschool. His TVI started working with him on how to button and zip a sweater or a jacket. And I don't even know if his friends were working on that at that time, but he was. And it really is something that may to some seem so simple, but to us here on this call, we know is so important. And it's something that he knew from a very young age, but something that he will use his whole life. So I think that's just something that in watching TVIs and all the specialists that we worked with and his teachers, it's just amazing again being a team and seeing maybe again something that's so small to some is such a can be such a big accomplishment, and again something that they use their whole life.
Well, and
So
it's so important too, because we know that some of these skills take our kids, the TVI in me is wanting to say it takes our kids longer to master some of these skills because we have to accommodate for the vision loss. And so, assistive technology is one of those, keyboarding, like, oh, well, they're going to learn it in 7th grade or whenever they're going to learn it. But, think about how much longer it's going to take our kiddos to be able to master that than a student who has typical vision. So, Jill, was that it, or do you have?
yeah,
Okay, so I
thanks
was going to
Kathi.
share a little bit about my experience, and thank you so much, Jill, for sharing, and
Mhm.
for the people who are sharing in the chat. I've been following that, and I'm it's so cool to read that stuff. And I'm going to read this O&M one in just a second when I'm done. But I I wanted to share a little bit about my service delivery, and just to recognize the importance of that of time and programming for kiddos with albinism who oftentimes are, and this is just me hearing what other people say, not necessarily tooting my own horn, although I do love to do that too, but who are oftentimes very articulate and very engaged and very capable and very good at faking it as well, I might add. I'm going to speak from personal experience on that. Really good at faking that you can see and kind of getting by because you don't want to look any more different than you already do or than you already have to. Um, so I grew up in a predominantly Mexican American tiny town in Texas, and I myself am Mexican American. So I was already looked so different because of my hair and my skin, that it was really hard for me to want to pick up those devices and to use the tools that I knew were going to be helpful to me. And I grew up at a time when early intervention really wasn't a big thing. And when I went to school and all of a sudden had this lady, follow following me around everywhere, which I now know was the observation process. It's all good. But my parents were really concerned about that because they didn't have a lot of information about what the services were going to look like and what they were going to be for. And so they kind of felt like, well, here's this person who's going to come in and hold my child's hand until they're 18 and then say, good luck, have a nice life. And so, you know, so we really pushed away my services, and they came. I only saw, um, if you want to unmute so that I can get the response of the collective gasp, I only saw my vision teacher once every 3 years for the reeval. That was the only time I saw my vision teacher, and it was awful because I didn't have a relationship with the teacher. And then I was being pulled out of class, obviously, for this intensive evaluation. And so then all the other kids were like, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you, are you in trouble, or what's going on? And so it was really problematic. But the benefit of that for me was that I did have to learn how to do things. I kind of learned how to do things on my own. I like to say that I learned things the hard way, and I still do that to this day. But I didn't qualify for orientation and mobility services because I was observed in familiar settings, and in my familiar little tiny hometown, where if you can't get home from the local fast food place and give directions, there's a lot of problems, so it's like, I was able to do all of those things because I went to those places so often with my family. And so, there were, although I will always believe that my parents did the best they could with the information that they had, because I don't think any parent wakes up and says, oh man, I cannot wait to ruin my kid's life by denying their services, but I think that, there are some things that I really could have benefited from learning, with someone who knew what was going on, instead of me, just thinking that I was stupid or not intelligent because I was struggling with algebra. It would have been nice to think like, oh, well, yeah, you probably are struggling because you can't see. You can't copy the notes with your monocular at the same time as you're listening to how this you're getting. I mean, I had these beautiful copied notes, that I copied myself with a monocular, but I had no idea what the teacher had said. So then when I would go home to work on it, it was really hard. Um, I was also telling Faye in the chat that I didn't learn how to cross the street until I was an adult out of the house. I couldn't read a crosswalk sign. We didn't have them in my hometown. And so I, those, I used to sit at the corner, and wait for a big group of people to accumulate at the crosswalk coming out of a class, and I would wait until they crossed, or until somebody across the street was crossing, and that's how I knew it was safe to cross, if I couldn't just look both ways and determine on my own. And so I really had to spend a lot of time as an adult learning some of those things, and so I think, I feel like a lot of times I have vision teachers say to me, well, I don't know what to do with this kiddo because they just have low vision and they're doing fine. And I'm like, well, maybe they're making B's and C's, but imagine what they could be doing if they had, technology, or if they had, if we were really sitting and watching what their access to print is like, because we all know there's good print and bad print. And enlarging something doesn't necessarily make it better, because you're also enlarging the white space, and so, or when things are photocopied so many times, there's a little ghost copy on there, and it's really hard. And so I like to work a lot with kids on giving them that language to talk about that so that they can, learn. But a lot of my challenges, were related to the expanded core curriculum, which now in Texas is legally mandated to, you have to evaluate and teach in those areas. And so that's really cool. It wasn't that such, when I was growing up, but it's really great. And so it's really cool to see the people who are posting in the chat working on all of those things. So thank you everyone for sharing. If there's anybody who wants to make any additional comments or ask any questions about this topic before we kind of shift to the next question, I'd be happy oh, thank you. Thank you, Denise, for humoring me with the gasp. I like that. And I also agree that the O&M, Andrea, who's writing about different, it sounds like the expanse of your caseload, where you've got some on little bitties and some older. And so that's really cool. Oh, and somebody says it feels like I'm telling their story. Yes, yes, faking the vision. And you know, it's like they all ask that yes or no question. Can you see that? Yep,
Yep.
absolutely. You know, so I started working on, no, we have to ask what. What do you see? Where do you see the whatever? You know, because that can you see it is so easy to just fake that. But anyway, I appreciate all of you guys sharing, and if you have questions, please ask them. So now we've started talking a little bit about this actually already. I hope I hit copy on this. Hang on. So I'm going to put another question in the chat. And this is not, I use the word challenges in this question, and this is not meant to be like, because we all know that kids with albinism are amazing and brilliant and wonderful, and it's built into our genetics, and we're super humble as well. And I'm speaking for all of us. But I'm curious if anyone's willing to share, what are some challenges you faced while programming for students with albinism? And what are some challenges that you think that the students and families, or if you are a student and or a family member, please share that you've faced during the school years? And so we're going to talk a little bit about we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you guys are sharing, and I talked a little bit about this already, but some of the challenges that I faced growing up were, I really struggled. So personally, I really struggled with my cultural identity because I'm Mexican American, but I don't look it. I don't look like anyone in my family. I was 18 years old before somebody told me, "Oh my God, you and your mom have the same smile." And I lost it. I mean, I just was in tears because nobody had ever told me that I looked like somebody in my family. And that was really hard. It was really hard. And I didn't grow up with a community of people with albinism. And so I grew up to be, quote, air quote, very normalized. I was treated the same way as my peers, as my siblings, which was wonderful. But on some level, it was also a bit challenging because I didn't have anybody talking to me about helping me embrace my differences and helping me understand those. And so I think what I struggled with a lot, I touched on, was areas of the expanded core curriculum. Learning that self-advocacy is not just about speaking up when you need help, but being able to tell people how to help you. And I'm still learning that. I just went through a situation a couple of years ago with paratransit where I couldn't qualify because I wasn't, quote, blind enough. But I'm a single parent with a young child, and I was really struggling. And so I really had to work with them and talk to them about and explain to them why it's challenging for me to travel in the bright sunlight at 4 p.m. with glare off the cars and everything, and that I have a child with me. And so I think all of those expanded core curriculum areas, the self-determination, career ed, assistive tech, social skills, it's hard to read. I don't think, it's not like, oh, kids with albinism have horrible social skills, but being able to read social cues. How do you know when it's your turn to jump into a conversation? Or how do you know when everybody's decided to kind of move on to something else if you don't see where they're looking, or what their attention is fixed on? And even, so I think those are areas that typically I experienced challenges in, was O&M and the not so much the self-advocacy, but refining that. But O&M and assistive technology were big for me because I didn't have I had a monocular and a dome magnifier, and I used that all the way up through halfway through my master's degree. And then I discovered Zoom text, and I was like in my 20s, and I started using Zoom text and carrying a cane, and I was like, holy cow, this is like, where's this been all my life? My friend's like, well, it's been there, you've just been really stubborn. I'm like, okay, well, fair enough. But yeah, so I think, and when I talk to TVIs in Texas, because that's mostly where my work is based, a lot of them are, well, I don't know what to do with this kid. They're a print reader, they're doing well, they have a device, they're using their phone, and it's like, well, talk to me about their self-advocacy. Do they understand their visual impairment? Do they understand, can they explain it to somebody if they need to? What are their computer skills like? Because to me, it's never too soon to work on those things, because again, we know it's going to take our kiddos a little bit longer to develop those skills when you're zoomed in, or when you're having to navigate areas that are new and different. You know, I still struggle sometimes with new websites that I'm not familiar with, but having those tech skills on search patterns and things is really helpful. Jill, do you want to share a little bit about what you're thinking about
Yeah,
the
you know,
challenges?
you know, while you were talking, Kathy, a couple of things popped into my mind, of, just experiences that we have to share. One thing you mentioned was a social aspect. And um, one thing that seemed to really help is, in particular in elementary school, sometimes by even the middle of the school year, our son wouldn't still know everybody's name in every student's name in his class. And what we found to be helpful was when teachers actually moved students around every so often in the class and changed their spot in class. He always stayed in the same seat closer to the front of the class, but his table always changed. And that actually gave him the opportunity to meet every single person in his class more close up than if the class was set up in a way where all the seats were in a straight line across the front in rows. So having the classroom set up as small working tables, small groups, and then they changed every so often, like every couple months or every month. That just gave him a chance, again, that social interaction with everyone in his class than just the same people all year long at his table. And then the other thing that Kathy mentioned was, is your student able to explain albinism or how their visual impairment affects them in school and so forth? And one of the things that our son started doing with his TBI and his orientation mobility specialist was picking a date after the first month or so of school, every school year, and he would do a presentation to his class. And just even as a kindergartner with his TBI, the presentation was sharing all the tools that he used in class. So the dome magnifier, the slant board, and it really got his friends involved and curious and excited to understand these things that they saw their friend use in class but didn't know what they were for. And it was an opportunity for them to have hands-on experience. So they actually sat down and used, the dome magnifier in a book that they're currently reading in class. And as he got older, in particular, there was a lesson in 5th grade where the teacher at the time was actually doing a lesson on the eye, and they actually happened to have a cow eyeball in the classroom that they had been dissecting as as a class. And his O&M teacher and the classroom teacher got together, and our son came in and actually talked about his orientation mobility lessons and what they were like and what he would do when he would leave with his O&M specialist and walk around campus or in the neighborhood. And he actually shared he utilizes a sight cane mostly now when he's in areas where he's not familiar, like if we're traveling, for instance. But at that time, he was using it in all of his lessons with his O&M specialist, and he had it with him that day. And so his friends were utilizing the sight cane, and he was actually teaching them how to use it properly. So, so those were some of the things that came to mind when Kathy was sharing.
Oh man, I love that cow eye lesson. I had to do that in my master's program, and then when I worked in short-term programs, we created a class called Super Science, and it was for middle school kids, and that we always did that. I was like, we have to order these eyes and do this because it'll be such a great practice for dissecting, and then it also is a good lesson about the eye. So it was so fun. Highly recommend it. They're super cool.
Well, and
Um,
you do a fun activity. You've done a fun activity at NOAA conferences as
oh
well
yeah,
about the eye with the kids.
the edible eyeball, yeah, with the campfire marshmallows and the Twizzlers, and that was we work a lot at TSBVI with Charlotte Cushman at Perkins, and so she was like, please write this up for Perkins. This is so great. So but yeah, that's a super fun one too. Talking about the eye and all of that. And so, because I find a lot of times that kiddos will say that, like, oh, they just asked me so many questions and I just hate answering all these questions. And really, and I'm not speaking for all students with visual impairments, but the ones that I've worked with, when we really get down to talking about it, they're able to recognize that a lot of these kiddos are just curious, and a lot of the students, my students, they don't have the language to really explain what's going on with their vision or why they use the tools that they do, and so really I think it's super cool. It was really important to me to help them develop that language, because I think you're a lot more willing to educate. Not that I don't believe that it's my or any other person with a visual impairment's responsibility to educate. I mean, I like to, and so I do, but there are some days that I just don't want to, and I get it, and I respect that for students as well. But I think there's a big difference between being annoyed and feeling embarrassed that you don't know how to answer those questions. And so I always just wanted to try to eliminate that as the problem, and make sure that they had the language to explain their eye condition, whatever it was, albinism or not. um, so Oh, look at that, Adrian. Thank you for posting that. The edible eyeball. It's so fun and yummy also. Um, but yeah, so does anybody at this point have any other questions or comments? I see people were putting some things in the chat about trying to fit in, and also the struggles of being different. And, I'm just going to be really honest in case you're not aware that I am, but um, if I could answer that question about how to get middle school and high school kids with vision impairments to use their devices, I totally would not be working at TSBVI anymore, because I would be a millionaire if I could answer that question. I would open a center for early childhood, and that's what I would spend the rest of my life doing. Early childhood VI, because that is just like the $10 million question. And I think the the challenge to that question is that I think the answer is really putting the time in on having that relationship with the student. And sometimes for kids with low vision, your service delivery time may not be um, high, because their needs may not be as intensive if they're not working on Braille or some of those things. And so it's kind of a catch-22. It's like you really have to have that relationship with them to get the buy-in on why this device is important and what it can do for you. But also you have to balance all the other things that you have to teach, maybe like kiddos who are Braille students and they have maybe more time. I think it's a really challenging question. And what I think happens most often, this is very informal, my very unexpert opinion, is that I think what happens most often is that eventually kiddos start to realize, or students start to realize, that if I want to accomplish my goals, then I'm going to have to stop worrying so much about what other people think of me and do what I need to do um, to to get it done. And some of us don't learn that until we're in our 30s or late 20s. And I like full disclosure. I'm trying to see if, oh no, I'm not. You can't see me pointing to myself. Um, man, that hard head is just so hard. It's like Earth's crust. It's just like you can't get through to this girl. But some kids learn it earlier, and a couple of times my mom had to say, well, fine. If you don't want to use your monocular, that's okay. But you're making a C in math. And if you keep making a C in honors math, I'm going to move you back to regular math or to the lower math, and you're not going to be in class with your friends. Boy, I picked that monocular up the next day, you know? So it's kind of like, you know, at some point it's hard to have those conversations where you're telling a student like, look, at some point you just have to realize that the most important thing is that you accomplish your goals, not what you look like. Because I'm not saying that that's a conversation that's easy to have, but that's where that relationship comes in, or working with your parents, the parents, to kind of be able to know if the student is able to understand that or ready to hear something like that, where you're just having a candid conversation about like, well, do you want to be able to meet your goals and reach your dreams, or are you more worried about what you look like right now? And this sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade year, it might be, I'm more worried about what I look like. And at some point, you know, I'm kind of like, well, okay, I respect that, you know, because I was there. But you know, it's a balancing act, and it's hard, and it can be really challenging. Um, so moving more into some of those answers, I'm just curious. The next question is, how many of you know about NOAA, which is the National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation, and have accessed information on their website? And then do your families know about NOAA, or are they participating in NOAA events? I know some families in California besides Jill, so I'm willing to bet that some of them do. We had a little guy who just moved from Texas to California, and I keep up with his mom, and I know she's connected to NOAA. So I'd just be curious if you want to do, I'll scan the group if somebody just wants to do a thumbs up on your reaction, or, you know, however, if you're aware of NOAA, I'm just curious. Oh, cool. Somebody's been working with their 8th grader to get into the teen spotlight. So while we wait for you guys to put answers in the chat, Jill and I are going to talk a little bit about our involvement with NOAA. Jill, you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So our family has been volunteering with NOAA now, maybe 10 years or so, maybe more than that. I keep forgetting that my son is a sophomore in high school, so so maybe it's more than 10 years now. And we've been involved in different ways. We've, as I shared earlier, we've participated in volunteering at the national conferences, which happen every 2 years. And they change different places in the country when they happen. I've also volunteered as a parent liaison for many years. So NOAA has a new parent program. And so for you TVIs, if you have a new parent, you could share the NOAA website, and they could sign up for the new parent program, and it would connect them with a parent liaison. And the parent liaison is there to support that parent in answering any questions they may have, and also walking them through some of the other resources that NOAA has for families. I've also, we've here in the Bay Area, our family has hosted a few events for families, and just to have an opportunity to get together and know others in our area. And I know there's other gatherings like that throughout California every once in a while, and throughout the country. And you can usually find out about those events on NOAA's website as well. And then I think Kathi has done this as well. I think both of us have hosted bowl-a-thons, which is actually, it's a fundraiser that NOAA has every year, but the bowl-a-thons happen all over the country. And it's such a fantastic, fun event to have families and friends come together. And it's all age groups. I mean, infants to adults with albinism and their families and friends who get together and just have a day of fun of bowling, and usually pizza in our case. And then we've also
and cupcakes and cookies in our case.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's because you're there, Kathy. She's the cookie
Yeah.
expert. So, and then I think we've also both hosted mini conferences in our areas as well. And so going again to NOAA's website, every once in a while there's a mini conference during a year that's not a national conference. That may pop up across the country. And again, it's another way in that sense to offer educational opportunities for the community on albinism, but also to have people have the opportunity to come together. So those are some of the things that I've been involved in. And then Kathy and I, we work together on parent connections and
yeah,
yeah,
a lot of
well, on different things. Yes, lots of things. You go for it, Kathy.
So I started, I did not, my mom always knew about NOAA. But I was that not interested kid that somebody was posting about in the chat. I didn't need that. I don't need those people, right? I didn't know that I needed those people. And so, so again, here I am, an adult, like having this, filling this hole in my heart that I didn't even know that was there. And so, and I'm going to move on to talking about what I do so that I don't start tearing up. But yeah, so I started in about, kind of connecting in online forums about 2006. But I didn't start, and I started writing for the quarterly publication in about 2012. Went to my first conference in 2014 and Jill was there. I had hosted the spring fundraiser was always kind of advertised as a bowl-a-thon. Now everybody's getting so creative now that we're in COVID pandemic, but I hosted several I lived in Portland, Oregon for a couple of years and I hosted one there, and then I hosted them every year in Austin. And I did do a mini conference as well. In 2015, I had just had a baby, and I love the pictures of me running around TSBVI campus with him in my arms, like while I'm trying to coordinate this mini conference. But so yeah, and so I've worked on planning committees for Adult Weekend, and Jill and I worked together on the most recent conference for the adult programming. So that was parents, grandparents, and adults with albinism as well. And then I also did 2 conferences. I worked on kids conference. So I was working with another NOAA partner to develop all the programming for kids. And I love it. I love everything I do for NOAA. And now it's kind of cool because I've been doing helping with the NOAA connections, which are on Zoom. And a lot of what I do for NOAA double dips into my job. And so that's really great also. It's, I always make the really lame joke that my personal and professional lines are very blurred because everything is for everything, but I wanted to share, NOAA is such a great organization. It's a nonprofit organization, and they work really hard to provide information and programs and supports for people and families, people with albinism and families who are affected by albinism. And it's just been such a joy. It's obviously, we know it's not something you can force. So for those who are posting that they have people who aren't interested, but maybe the parents might be interested in finding connections that way. I also bribe students as well. And sometimes that I have no shame. But yeah, and so we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the programs and services that NOAA has that are, and who they may benefit. So I'm going to put a list in the chat. I put the link to the NOAA website in the chat.
You want me to add it, Kathy?
I got it, girl. It's already,
okay.
I'm going to hit enter and it's going to be there magically.
All right.
I always underestimate my tech skills until I actually get in there.
He's awesome.
So we're going to talk a little bit about these programs, and we've pasted the links in as well. Jill put them in the agenda for me, which was so helpful. And so these are in no particular order. I just started writing them down and then going with it. So the school kit is a project that Jill and I first worked on together. I think that was our first project together.
It was.
And so I had written an article for Albinism Insight about what do you do when it's time to go back to school. And I just asked a bunch of families to contribute blurbs about what are the things they do when they go back to school to help their kiddos feel connected in the classroom and to program for the kiddo with albinism in the gen ed classroom, basically. And then I was like, man, we should really write this stuff down. And I was like, it would be so cool if there was a blah, 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 where you could go and get all this information. And the executive director at the time said, great, you're the project lead, go for it. And so, so we came up with a school kit, and it's got several different sections in it. There's sections for parents to just print information and hand out to the teachers. And there's sections there's interview questions that the teachers and parents can ask each other, which I know seems weird that you would give a teacher a set of questions and say, here, ask me these questions. But it's the whole point of the school kit is because there's such a variance in service delivery for these students. The whole point is that it's a set of documents that parents can take and use, hopefully, with their child's gen ed teacher in conjunction with a TVI or not. If there isn't a TVI, some kiddos with albinism are on 504 plans and they don't have a regular TVI that comes and sees them. So it's designed for that, and there's a variety of different sections, resources on albinism, resources on the vision component of albinism, assistive technology, PE, how do you handle PE and field trips and things like that. And Jill and I were just cringing the other day about how it's probably time for an update. So that's going to be a big, long thing. And then there's the CARE project. Jill, do you want to talk about CARE? Have you ever used CARE?
Yeah, so actually, it was a great resource when we first started talking about IEPs with our team, just to understand what an IEP was, what it might look like, what questions should we ask when we get together with the service providers and the classroom teachers. So the CARE project actually is a place where you can go and look at examples of IEPs. And I believe there are a few IFSPs as well. And they're broken out by state. And
also by age, right?
By age too. Yeah. And or grade, I think it is. Mm-hmm. And then I believe there's also some 504 plans. I know that comes up sometimes as well. So again, it's just a wonderful resource for parents, but also for educators, for TVIs and O&M specialists and others who are writing goals for their students.
Yeah, the next thing on my to-do list, that's also something that Noah has expressed an interest in kind of updating or reshaping. Mm-hmm. And the VI teacher in me looked at some of the goals and was like, oh no, so I want to work on, we want to work on getting some really nicely worded goals that are, like SMART goals and things that people can use. But I know a lot of families on Facebook talk about the CARE project. So thank you. Then there's Albinism Insight, which is the quarterly publication, but which is great for families, I think, and professionals, but it's typically about a 40-page full color magazine that comes 4 times a year, and that has articles written by many of them are written by people with albinism. Many of them are written by professionals who maybe don't have albinism, but there's sections in there for everybody. I mean, it's really cool because they have a section for teens, a section for younger students, and a section for families. Then they have the Noah Notables, which is what cool things are happening in the community, who graduated, who got married, who had a baby, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of articles about rec leisure and assistive technology, which I think families find really useful. I mean, I didn't grow up doing a lot of cool rec leisure things, and now I see all the stuff that other adults with albinism are doing. I'm like, man, where was I? Like, I wanted to do that, so but it's cool to see people with albinism snowboarding and skiing and playing baseball and doing like quote normal things, so I think that magazine is really great for families. But another super cool thing that we came up with to come out of that was the NOAA EdU supplement. And that's for educators, and it's an electronic quarterly email that comes out, and there's a committee who looks at the magazine, the current Albinism Insight articles, and decides, and I think I might be the only one on the committee right now, but there was 3 of us. And we decide like what articles would be relevant to educators, to VI teachers or gen ed teachers or speech pathologists or whoever's working with kids with albinism, what articles would be relevant to them. And so we make a little mini magazine, and it's electronic, it's a newsletter, and it has usually 3 to 7 articles in it, that gets blasted out to those who have signed up for that publication. And so it's just a little supplement. It's super cool, and a lot of VI teachers have said that they've used it with their students to help them get interested in NOAA, just kind of passed it out and let them see what's available.
Hey, Kathy, there's 2 other publications that people might be interested in, and those are the books that NOAA has. I'll go ahead and put the link here.
Yeah, so it's Raising a Child with Albinism, A Guide to the Early Years. And then the second book is Raising a Child with Albinism, A Guide to the School Years.
Let's see if this works.
I think it's school years, right? Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. Raising a Child with Albinism, A Guide through the School Years. Yeah.
Yeah, which is awesome because every chapter is about something different. There's O&M stuff and IEP stuff and social stuff. And at the end, there's a tapestry of bio, like short bios or short blurbs from people, adults with albinism in the community. And so that
Kathy's one of them.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah, but it's a super cool, it's just a really neat book. I love it. It's beautiful.
Well, and both of them are nice to have, as a family, but also as a TVI. They're good resource books.
So right now, during the pandemic, NOAA has started doing a lot of virtual events, including a virtual conference that we did this last summer in 2020. There's always, on the odd years, the big NOAA conferences are on the odd years. So, I mean, the even years, I'm sorry. So in 2022, we'll be in Orlando, Florida at Disney. And in 2024, we'll be back in Orange County, which is where we were supposed to be this summer, for Disney again. So we're going to do double Disney. They alternate East Coast, West Coast, and what's the other, like
Midwest.
we just call it middle. Yeah.
Midwest.
So everybody likes to try to predict where the next one's going to
be. It's a big,
a big
reveal.
thing. We do a big reveal. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah,
anticipation.
So the NOAA conference is amazing. They do programming for everybody, for adults with albinism, for adults without albinism who are raising little ones with albinism or whatever. They have kids programming, and so it's just a huge conference. On the odd numbered years, they typically do family camp, which is in New Hampshire. And also adults with albinism weekend, which usually happens in September. International Albinism Awareness Day is June 13th.
Yep,
and there's
coming
always
up.
Something for that. But right now they're doing so many virtual events, and they're called NOAA Connections. And so there's the parent and grandparent connections. And then there's connections for people with albinism of all ages. So for adults, we have we just did a book club for middle grades. And we do preschool connection, we do elementary, teen, tween, young adults with albinism. I'm going to speak to that group on Thursday about parenting without pigment. And so there's just something for everyone if you go to that NOAA Connections page. And it's kind of nice right now because some of those kiddos who are not as willing can sometimes just log in and listen, and they don't have to be, they can kind of hide a little bit, until they're ready if they want to. But those are great. And there's a lot of stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. And then Jill, do you want to finish up with about the archived conference sessions?
Yeah, so at the website that the link that Kathi shared, if you go to that link, you'll see the sessions that were recorded from this last conference that we did virtually. And I believe, let's see, I was going to try to go to, if you just go to the website without the link, you'll find it under NOAACon, and then you can view the conference session library and the Vimeo showcase.
Mm-hmm.
And so it definitely is worth going to and getting a feel for what a conference might be like and sharing it with families. So if they're interested in maybe going to a conference, they have kind of a feel for what a conference may be like, but also it's educational. So some of the sessions that you would find there, including the opening session, is also educational sessions such as latest albinism research, genetics of albinism for beginners, all about albinism for kids, and one that Kathi did was taking the angst out of literacy media discussions. So Kathi, actually, did you want to talk about that session a little bit? Because I think that might be a good resource for everyone here on this call.
Yeah, and I was also going to say too about there's a lot of sessions like you were saying, Jill, the albinism for kids, and there's a lot of sessions that are geared towards kids of different ages. They're kind of grouped out by age. And so that could be something that I could totally see people using their service delivery time to say, hey, we're going to check this out and see what you think about this and have a conversation about this.
That's a great idea.
But the taking the angst session just came from conversations that I've had with families and professionals about the dual media kind of question. You know, the big kind of print versus braille debate for kids with albinism. And so a colleague of mine and I got together and did a presentation, a session on how do you making that decision and making that determination. And of course it was geared, the audience was parents. But you know, we felt like we kind of came at it from a professional standpoint, and so or perspective, and so we just gave people a lot of things to consider. And of course the rest of the title is spoiler alert, it's not either or. You know, and so we were kind of just proposing that, you know, for kids who really do need some tactile learning, that there's ways to do that and to break it up and to make it meaningful for everyone, and talked about really good quality evaluations being the foundation of making that decision. And so that it was a fun one. It was something I was really passionate about, and I was glad we got to do it. So it doesn't give you any answers. It just kind of talks about what questions you might ask to make that decision. Does anybody, before we close, we wanted to close with a video of the NOAA virtual choir performing. We did a virtual choir song that we all recorded in our own bedrooms or houses, and then it was mixed together. And we thought we wanted to close with that because I think sometimes the theme of the song is very poignant, I think, for all audiences in the call. And so we wanted to share that. But before we do that, does anybody have any questions or thoughts that they'd like us to pick at before we go? And if not, that's totally cool. I just want to, but we're going to, I think Adrian and his team are going to share that video.
I want to thank you guys. I'm really impressed with the attitude and transparency of NOAA as an organization. I think it mirrors a lot of what we do in our outreach efforts as the School for the Blind. Everything on the website is so open and quick, and from the IEPs, they're just up there, right?
Yeah.
Like they're, you guys are just, you got to get resources in people's hands. and let people choose from there. And it's really, thank you for this
Absolutely.
and the work you do with Noah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Adrienne.
It looks like Winnie's got us queued up.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt like you could disappear? Like you could fall and no one would hear? Well, let that lonely feeling wash away. Maybe there's a reason to believe you'll be okay.
'Cause when you don't feel strong enough to stand,
You can reach out your hand.
and oh, someone will come running.
And I know they'll take you home. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again.
Lift your head and look around.
You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found.
NOAA, the National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation's mission is to act as a conduit for accurate and authoritative information about all aspects of living with albinism,
and to provide a place where people with albinism and their families in the U.S. and Canada can find acceptance, support, and fellowship.
There's a place where we don't have to feel alone. And every time that you call out, you're a little less alone. If you only say the word, from across the silence, your voice is heard. Oh.
I know someone who really needed to hear this today. So thank you, Noah, for doing what you're doing.
Oh.
It's so easy to feel alone, but we're not alone. None of us.
None of us.
None of us are alone.
Thank you, Noah, for giving us a space to remember we're not alone.
To be together.
To find each other.
Sending love from Michigan. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
To take you home, to take you home, to take you home, to take you home. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. If you only look around, you will be found. You will be found. You will be found. Out of the shadows, the morning is breaking and hope is new. Hope is new. It's filling up the empty, and suddenly I see that all is new. All is new. You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. crashing through when you need someone to carry you.
When you're broken on the ground,
You will be found. When the sun comes streaming in, you reach up and you rise again. If you only look around, you will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found.
Awesome. Thank you.